Hello Rebel and GMAN Division 9. Welcome along to your Week 7 recap. We're over halfway through now and things are beginning to hot up towards the top of Division 9. That is for sure. We're going to get straight on with it as always. Plenty to get through today. And the performance of the week is where we always start. And there was a big game, remember, this week between Bloody Mary Queens and the Big Cups right up towards the top of the table. And the winners of this one were the Big Cups. The Dwarfs coming out 2-1 winners from this game. We actually managed to cast this one on Monday Night Rebel. So I know a lot of the GMAN 9 guys were there watching that to see how the game went. But in the end, it was fairly dominant stuff from the Dwarfs in the end. The High Elves taking a lot of damage. Thankfully, not much of it was permanent. So there you go, 21 armor breaks to 1, which is horrendously one-sided, but also what you'd expect from a Dwarf versus Elf game, really. Bloody Mary Queen scored early around turn 2. And we're hoping to repeat their trick against the Watch from week 6, where they were able to turn the ball over and score again. But the longer the game went on, the more you felt that they just lacked that little bit of utility to break apart the cage, especially with tackle on all of the cage corners. Suddenly the Agi5 cage dives were nowhere near as useful as they might have been against the Orc team. And it showed the Big Cups able to just grind the Bloody Mary Queens down for a 2-1 win. And getting performance of the week because it was very commanding. I mean, have a look at that. 5 casualties, 5 KOs. The High Elves actually suffered 9 casualties in the game. It was pretty much a pitch clear. So the perfect Dwarf 2-1 grind was very well played by Juvasak, and he continues his march at the top of the table. So a good result for him. What happened elsewhere? Well, here you go. Here are your Week 7 results. So as we spoke about, Bloody Mary Queens with a 2-1 defeat to the Big Cups, which halts their good progress that they'd been making recently, I should say. Chosen of Papa Nurgle 1, Adenelphos 1. So the Nurgle dropping more points in what you might have thought was a winnable fixture for them. A great result for Matthew there, picking up a 1-1 tie with the highest TV team in the division. Sabertooth Vag 3.0 with a 2-0 win against the Boondock Skinks. MB Carmack keeping pace with the Dwarfs at the top. Another win for him, and he's in very good form at the moment. These Wood Elves are a team to avoid right now. Shock and Gore with a 2-1 win against Sci-Fi Saurai. So a second defeat in a row for Cthulhu Collector against an undead team. Really struggling, these lizards. In fact, all of the lizards in the division are not having a great time this season. As you can see, it was defeats for all 3 of them this week. But a good win for Gruff, who's starting to get his season onto a decent track. The Watch stopped the rot with a 1-1 draw against Hack Slash and Mutilate, who've now drawn 3 on the spin. So Jonah is getting there. We still want that first win, don't we? But he's now managed to stop the rot when it comes to losing games, which is at the very least progress. Erwinder's Requiem 3, Sneaky Blinders 1. Erwinder managing to run in 3 touchdowns this week with his undead team, and again keeping pace with those at the top of the table. Wheels have fallen off a little bit for Aromasin after that promising undefeated start. 2 defeats in his last 2 now for Sneaky Blinders. Though there was some good news for them this week, as we'll see a little later in the show. And Hubat getting themselves a win. A 2-0 victory over Quiguanas. I think for the Vampires that one was fairly overdue. Paolo B will be happy with that one. But as we said, defeats for all 3 Lizard teams this week is not good for Lizard kind. Right, so I guess we'll start. We've talked about the Big Cups win, as they did get performance of the week. So we'll start with the next one down, which is the Chosen of Papa Nurgle taking on Adenelphos. And the first thing you'll spot is that compared to previous weeks, the armor breaks low for Lava Jackal, and that could go a long way to explaining why this one ended as a tie. It was just the 2 casualties suffered for the Dark Elves, though it has to be said there were 8 KOs in the match, which is a hell of a lot. But Matthew able to do enough to hang on to an all-important point for him. Also managed to badly hurt 2 of the Nurgle Warriors in the game, which is quite impressive actually when you think of it. And that was done a lot to stop Lava Jackal from winning the game. So Matthew throwing the spanner in the works. And that's the thing, when you've got these teams down the bottom of the table, they're not guaranteed victories. They're still able to get involved and throw spanners in the works of the top teams. And that is exactly what's happened here. Lava Jackal remains undefeated and is the only undefeated team in the division now. But it's more draws than victories, and ultimately come the end of the season, that could prove to be costly. Just a 25 blocks, producing those 10 removals there. So the removal rate when the Nurgle were able to get hits was pretty high, actually. But the Elves played their game well and managed to hang on for the tie in the end. So well done, Matthew. That's a great result for him. And hopefully gives him a little bit of confidence for the second half of the season. Sabertooth Vag took down the Boondock Skinks. It's unfortunately another defeat for Moondingo, who is struggling a little bit. Still the top lizard team in the division, but struggling to find a little bit of form. Here's how the match report looked. So 13 armor breaks to 7 in the lizard's favour, but 13 armor breaks is not really enough when you're facing Wood Elves. And Pushkin picking up an MVP. That's a nice war dancer with Strip Ball, Tackle and Mighty Blow. And he's not too far away from another skill now as well, which is great news for MB Carmack. In terms of the game, it was even on the removals, which is exactly what the Lizards don't want. You would want to try and get yourself a numerical advantage against Wood Elves. Every team will want to do that. But the Lizards not able to do so. And in the end, MB Carmack able to turn over possession and run in a second touchdown, and that was good enough to get him yet another victory and keep pace with the big cups at the top of the table. Sci-Fi Samurai 1, Shock and Gore 2 is the next one, and it's a third defeat in a row for Cthulhu Collector, coming alongside a third win in a row for Shock and Gore. So it's two teams very much motoring in opposite directions, certainly in terms of their form over the past 3 weeks. This is how the game looked. It was again 13 armor breaks to 8 this time for the Sci-Fi Samurai, who again lost by 1 touchdown, weren't able to take advantage of any of the tips they picked up in that defeat against Erwinder's Requiem the week before, but did manage to cause a hell of a lot of damage. Another dead rookie ghoul for Shock and Gore, and a zombie biting the dust as well. So 2 kills from the Lizards this time out. And I should mention, as I overlooked it last week, that the Sci-Fi Samurai do have themselves a Strength 5 Saurus now, which is excellent news for them. Missed that from the development report last week. So apologies to Cthulhu Collector for that. I am but one man and occasionally will overlook things. But a good result nonetheless for Gruff this week. Boris here getting a level, which is all right for him. And he did manage to level the Mighty Blow, Tackle, White, Oliver Hardy as well. And we'll see what he got a little later on. But plenty of SPP at least for Cthulhu Collector to lick his wounds with, I suppose. 15, 17, 21 SPP is not bad going at all. But we would like to see a few more points on the board. So, as we said, the Watch managing to stop that losing streak with a 1-1 draw against Jonah's Humans, Hack, Slash and Mutilate. It was very, very one-sided on the armor break front, as you might expect when you Orcs against Humans. The old classic Blood Bowl showdown, this one. The Humans only managing the 3 armor breaks, though, which is not great at all. So, Jonah with his third straight 1-1 draw now. From all of those defeats earlier in the season, he has, at the very least, managed to stop losing games and has very much become the master of the 1-1 draw. Now it's just about, can we turn that into a 1-0 or a 2-1 victory if we want to progress towards the end of the season. But we're getting there, and he is moving in the right direction, which is great news. For the Watch, a win is what we would have needed to have any hope of getting back into the playoff race. With a draw and obviously 3 defeats before that, I think that ship has probably sailed for Alzir at this point. But at the very least, it's not another defeat. And he did manage to level 2 of his Black Orcs in the game as well. One of them picking up Guard to replace the Guard that he missed. And Fred Colon here picking up Block for good measure. So that's not all bad news for either side. But again, both coaches would have much preferred a victory. Match 6 was more undead, and Erwender's Requiem with a 3-1 win against Sneaky Blinders. Erwender just coming into a little bit of good form at the right time of the season, is able to keep himself right on pace with the guys towards the top, and indeed right on pace with the other undead team. Both undead teams with identical records. There's only 1 touchdown difference between them at this stage, which is really interesting to see. 2 different teams, obviously they're the same race, but they're certainly not built identically, but producing identical records at this halfway point of the season. This is how the game looked. The undead actually outbashed by the underworld here. Aromasin clearly able to take advantage of his claw mighty blow hits in this one, but not full advantage in the end. The undead proving too strong. And undead will be a difficult matchup for Underworld, of course. They're quite a solid team, are undead, and regen. It means that a lot of those players at the claw mighty blow wipe out. We'll be back shortly after. So it was 2 touchdowns for Olivier Lassagne. No, 2 casualties, sorry, for Olivier Lassagne. And 2 touchdowns for Paul Therian. And Paul Therian has won this week's Player of the Week. Now, ever so slightly controversial, this one. I believe there was 3 or 4 players who all got 6 SPP. 3 of them managed to score 2 touchdowns. And 1 of them managed to score 3 casualties for their 6 SPP. So 2 touchdowns for 3 players and 3 casualties for 1 player. Paul Therian nicks it on some sort of weird tiebreaker I had to come up with. So as we said the last time, touchdowns go ahead of casualties because they tend to win your games. Well, Paul Therian of the 3 is the only one who didn't have sure hands, so we went for that. But he is a strength 4 white who managed to score a couple of touchdowns, which puts him nicely towards his next level, which is great news for Erwender. So Paul Therian there picking up the Player of the Week, so well done to him. Meanwhile, this is what... Well, we've had a quick look at what the game was like, but as we say, 14 armor breaks to 13. The guard zombie there getting the MVP. If we can get 1 more of them, then we can pick up block, and block guard zombies are, of course, excellent. Shame to see another goblin picking up an MVP that we didn't really want there for Sneaky Blinders, but both teams helping themselves to a nice smattering of SPP, which helps keep their development going. Similarly to the watch, Aromasin's playoff chase is almost certainly over. If you've only won 1 game by week 7, you're not going to be challenging, especially when there's 1 spot towards only 1 spot to get in. So it's all about development for next season. We'll see if he wants to keep Sneaky Blinders around for a 3rd campaign. I'd certainly like to see it. And based on the level he rolled after the game, he might be tempted himself. Final game was a victory for the Vampires, and a long overdue one. Paolo B able to run out 2-0 victor against Extrems Lizards, who again are all the Lizard teams really having a rough time this season. None of them able to challenge towards the top. So a poor result for Quiguanas, but Hubat managed to leap up into that mid-table area, and the Vampires finally coming good. 5 armor breaks tells its own story. Those thralls very, very survivable in this one. And the match report was fairly dull, to be honest. When you have a look, there was a couple... Well, there was 1 badly hurt either way. And then only a couple of KOs as well. So if you were here for blood, you were going to be missing out, unfortunately. There was very, very little of it. As you can see here, just a couple of KOs that way. Both of the casualties were actually caused from players falling over rather than being inflicted by the opposition. Or that might have been from fouls. I'm not sure how fouls are calculated on the stats here. So you can see that there. The SPP count very, very low. Duke Rex Crane managing to pick up 1 of the touchdowns and a pass and the MVP. And similarly, Count Amadan the Vane with a touchdown and an MVP. So with... a touchdown and a pass, I should say there. Tlanyoltir did manage to level himself up. And as you can see, he picked up dive and tackle. So there you go. Nothing awfully exciting, but not a great week for Quiguanas. No SPP really to go with the defeat. Tends to go down as a bad week, unfortunately. Okay, so on that subject, the injury report for this week is fairly light on numbers. There wasn't really much in the way of casualties at all. The vast majority of them came on this lot, the Bloody Mary Queens, who of course went up against the Dwarfs. Now they took a niggle on runner Larindius here, so it'll be interesting to see whether he's kept around. He's armor value 7 and niggled now, and he's not a great player, only dodge at this stage, so be interesting to see what Soulforge does with him. I also took a movement bust on this guard player, so Menanorni and Taloneth will be missing for the next match. So a little bit of permanent damage there. The Dwarfs leaving their mark on the Bloody Mary Queens and doing something. There was also a death as well. A dodge lineman died on the LOS during this game. So a little bit of trimming for the High Elves, who have 200k in the bank to replace whatever they want to replace. And on that subject, it might not be too bad an idea to replace that catcher while we have that money in the bank. Because obviously you want to burn this so you're not upping your team value unnecessarily anyway. But considering how many casualties they took, it could have been worse. There was a lot of badly hurt, so Soulforge will probably just take this one on the chin, and it won't be too difficult. The movement bust on the guard lineman isn't really a massive deal, to be fair. You're going to keep him around until he dies regardless, because guard is just excellent, full stop, on a high elf team. Only one other player to talk about, actually, and unfortunately we have to go back to the Orcs of the Watch again. And it's a stat bust for old Nobby Nobs. The Mighty Blow plus movement blitzer has unfortunately taken agility bust. So that if he's going down the killer route, that doesn't affect him too badly. But it does mean that later in his development, you're going to want to get Juggernaut. So that if you do roll that both down, you can still push the player away if you've blitzed, as opposed to having to then make a 4+ dodge. So all that really does, if we're designing the Nobby Nobs to be a killer blitzer, which I think with Mighty Blow we probably are, movement 7's good as well, to be fair, then all you're really looking for is Juggernaut at some point on that development cycle. And that negates the agility bust, and then we can keep him as a pretty decent player. Okay, so that's it for the injury report. We've got nothing else to talk about besides some deaths to zombies and ghouls and whatnot. So what we're going to do is bring in a little bit of extra stuff in this week's development report. Now, we talked already about the block guard ghoul, who also has Mighty Blow on the watch. He was the first one I wanted to mention here, but we have sort of mentioned that already. And it's just a black orc with block, Mighty Blow, and guard. It's nothing too exciting. So we will move on to Aaron Alphos, who are first up this week. Now, having only taken one miss next game from the match against the Nurgle, they would class that as a great week, you have to say. And to make things even better, they have managed to get Mighty Blow on a Witch Elf. Kalesris here, who already had block, has rolled a double and picked up Mighty Blow. And the interesting thing about that is, of course, is that they already had a Mighty Blow Witch Elf. So now we have two Mighty Blow Witch Elves on this Dark Elf team. Suddenly, match you with a little bit of hitting power as and when he needs it. So an excellent reward there for a good result against Lava Jackal's Nurgle. And this has to go down as a good week for Aaron Alphos. Elsewhere, we saw the level for the High Elf earlier, that one of the RG5 High Elves, but it's not been rolled yet, so we can't really talk about something that hasn't been rolled. What we can talk about is Shock and Gore, because Oliver Hardy, who was the Mighty Blow Tackle White, has leveled, and we now have another Pommer in the division, folks. So that White, who took Tackle in the first place, took a little bit of time to get there this season. He was on 29 out of 31 SPP for a long time, but has now managed to get that all-important casualty to pick up piling on. So that obviously makes him much more of a threat to everyone else, and Gruff will be happy to get his first piling on player on this team. It's taken him a long time to get there, a couple of seasons really. Certainly a season and a half to manage to pick up a Pommer, but he's finally done so, and we'll see how Oliver Hardy goes from here. 20 SPP to go at the next level, but with Mighty Blow and piling on, he'll get there quicker than you might want, unless you're Gruff. Right, we're saving the best to the last, because Sneaky Blinders have rolled a 12. And it's always interesting when people roll 12s, because we're talking strength ups then, normally. It's very, very interesting, though, when people roll 12s on big guys. Arthur Shelby is now strength 6. Now, of course, the reason that's interesting is because rolling a 12 means you've rolled a double 6. And rolling a double means you have the option of taking block, Now, it's always a tough decision whether you go for the plus strength or the block. I remember when I played Halflings back in season 7, the first tree man level I got was a double 6. And you're thinking, well, strength 7 tree, happy days, but also I want a block tree. I went with the block in the end and was duly punished for not taking the plus strength when the tree proceeded to basically take root on the first turn of every game for the entire season, which is Nuffle's way of saying never turn down a strength up, and Aromasin has gone for it here. So we now have a strength 6 tentacles guard. Now strength 6 tentacles is excellent as a combination. That is going to be an absolute nightmare for opposition players to dodge away from. And of course an absolute nightmare to block because he's strength 6. So in this case, taking the strength 6, because he already had the tentacles, is really a very, very good decision. And that Warpstone Troll is going to be a real problem, especially for the lower strength teams in the division. And maybe those teams lacking a bit of guard as well. Alright, that is it for the development report. And that, of course, means it's time to move on to the form guide. Now, it was fairly straightforward to put together the top 3 in the form guide this week because it's all wins. Look at that. The Big Cups have now won 5 straight games and remain comfortably at the top of the form guide. Absolutely no budging them for the time being. They are closely followed, of course, by Sabertooth Vag 3.0, who have now won their last 4. No, in fact, it's the last 3, but they've certainly got plenty of wins over the past few weeks, so they're now 3 wins out of the last 3. And Shock and Gore have also now won their last 3 as well. So all 3 of these teams going great guns at this stage. And this is really the point of the season where you want to do that, because it really helps to keep you in that playoff chase and makes you one of those forces to be reckoned with as you come into the latter weeks. You want to be certainly fighting in the top 4, maybe even the top 3 when it comes to the final few weeks when there's one playoff spot up for grabs. And all 3 of those teams are doing that because they're managing to just reel off those victories. Elsewhere, it's looking slightly better for the Watch. They haven't lost their last 3 now, so they've got 1 point from the last 3. Similarly, Quiguanas are struggling at the moment, but it's the Sci-Fi Sauri who find themselves right down the bottom now with 3 defeats from their last 3 games. Things not going particularly well for Cthulhu Collector. Despite the good levels on his Saurus, he's just come up against some good teams in recent weeks. Will be desperate to fix that next week and try and pick up another win. It's been a while since that Lizard team picked up a victory now. So hopefully things turn around for all 3 of those teams soon. Quiguanas have had a tough old season as well, as have the Boondocks Kings, who weren't too far away from being back here in the lower end of the form guide. But yeah, not great for Lizard Kind, as we were saying earlier. And that subject here is the league table. So this is the top 6. And you can see the Big Cups still holding on to that playoff position now as we've passed the halfway point. 6 games to go. And it is all to play for. Still the top 6 teams. The only real change is that the Bloody Mary Queens drop from 3rd to 6th after that defeat to the Big Cup. So they're now 6 points off that playoff place and are very much relying on other teams defeating Juvasac now to allow them to catch back up. 1 defeat for the Big Cups, of course, would give Sabertooth Vag the chance to overhaul them at the top of the table. They've got a win for them would put them on to 19 points. And if it was a draw for Juvasac, then there's a chance of MB Carmack catching him up points-wise, and it comes down to touchdown difference at that point. Interesting to see the Dwarfs with the best touchdown difference of any team in the division. Now, of course, winning games does tend to improve your touchdown difference, as you would expect. But even managing to do better than the Elves in that regard. And actually, to be fair to Juvasac, it's all down to some very solid defence. He's not conceded many touchdowns at all this season. And not conceding touchdowns tends to mean you don't lose Blood Bowl games. And not losing Blood Bowl games gives you every chance to win Blood Bowl games. Not difficult when you think about it that way. The actual challenge is implementing it on the field, right? Chosen of Papanergal still in 3rd place. But you can see 3rd, 4th and 5th now, all on 13 points. only split by the touchdown difference. The two undead teams in there as well. But they're now 5 points off the top, so the big cups with a little bit of a cushion to those sides in third, fourth and fifth. If it keeps up at a similar rate, this is going to be a two-horse race between the Dwarfs and the Wood Elves, who are still yet to play each other. If I've got that correct, I believe they are due to meet. I'm just having a look through the fixture list now in the background here. They are due to meet in week 12. That could be an absolutely huge game if it's just those two in the running when it comes down to the final couple of weeks. So week 12 could be absolutely massive for both MB Carmack and Juvasac. But of course, there's a long way to go to get to week 12. You've got 4 more games between now and then to play, and you've got to keep those wins rolling in. So let's not look any further than the next fixture. And the next fixture list looking a bit like this. It's a battle between Aaron Elfos and Sci-Fi Saurai first. Well, we said the Cthulhu Collector really wanted to win. Now, Aaron Elfos also struggling for form. Might be a pretty good chance to get that. But we also said that about Lava Jackal last week. We would have thought he would have had a great chance of beating the Dark Elves and picking up a much-needed win. But Matthew is no mug, and it'll be tough going for the Sci-Fi Saurai. But we'll see what Cthulhu Collector can do. He needs to start racking up that damage against the Dark Elves to establish a numbers advantage and then go from there, really. Hack, Slash and Mutilate against Erwinder's Requiem. Well, we'll see if Jonah can pull out another 1-1 draw, but you would make the Undead's favourite for this one. Erwinder really on a bit of a tear at the moment with 2 wins in his last 2. He's been around Rebel for a long time, has Erwinder. And this is probably as good form as we've seen him in. He's tended to struggle towards the bottom of the table in the divisions he's been in. So it's nice to see a couple of wins back-to-back now for him, and challenging towards the top of this division as well. Quiguanas against the Boondock Skinks. Well, it's Lizard versus Lizard, and realistically, neither of them want a draw. As we've said before, it's 10th versus 12th. Neither side with any chance of the playoffs, really. So very much a fight between these two and Cthulhu Collector now to be the top Lizard team in the division, which at the very least would be some consolation prize. The Boondock Skinks currently leading that race, but a little bit like the blind leading the blind, as things go. But yeah, we would probably look at this and say, well, you'd like to see Quiguanas pick up a win, and you'd like to see the Boondock Skinks pick up a win, but of course they can't both do that. So it's dog eat dog out there in Blood Bowl. And in Lizard, it tends to come down to who wins that bash war between the Saurus. Whoever gets the first couple of removals, it can really start to snowball from there. So it'll be about getting that mighty blow to fire and then seeing if you can capitalise on that. Next up, Sabertooth Vag taking on the still very much out of form The Watch, and you've got to make the Wood Elves heavy favourites for that, especially when you consider what happened to The Watch the last time they faced Elves, the Bloody Mary Queens, when it finished 0-5. So MB Carmack will be going into this game full of confidence, knowing that result happened. Maybe choosing to study that game to have a look at the sort of tactics that Soulforged employed. But similarly, I imagine Alzir will be having a look at it and saying, well, I don't want to make the same mistakes I made against the Bloody Mary Queens. I want to make sure I keep things much tighter, because of course the difference with Wood Elves is they've got leapers to come into the cage, so it's important to make sure you've got everything positioned properly. And there's still a chance of the Orcs picking up a surprise result here. If that mighty blow that they've got can fire, then that would be great news. But of course they are missing that movement 7 mighty blow blitzer for this one, which you have to say is a big result for the Wood Elves. Having a mighty blow player missing is just excellent for them. It is the Orcs, though, who are picking up a couple of hundred TV in inducements, which is interesting to see. Alzir currently at 1340 TV, whereas the Wood Elves at 1590. So potential for the Orcs to pick up a wizard, possibly a bribe or two, or maybe even a star player or a chainsaw or something, if that's the route they wanted to go for. Be interesting to see what Alzir does, but you would make MB Carmack the favourite for this one for sure. Really interesting game next between Shock and Gore and the Bloody Mary Queens. Shock and Gore on a bit of a tear at the moment with 3 wins from their last 3 games. So Gruff going great guns, The Bloody Mary Queens were in similar form, but of course took that all-important defeat against the big cups, and they really need to bounce back with a win here if they're harbouring any playoff ambitions. Another defeat, and you would probably say they could end up 9 points behind, and at this stage that's probably going to be too far cut adrift with at least 5 teams above them in the table. So Soulforged really needs to pick up a victory here if he wants to get back into that playoff race. He's hanging on by his fingertips. Still only lost. That was his first defeat of the season, so it does sound quite harsh, but of course all those draws do add up when the Dwarfs and the Wood Elves are winning as consistently as they are. So if Soulforged can get himself back on winning ways here, then he has every chance of catching up if the guys at the top start to drop some points. Ooh, okay, so the 6th game is between Sneaky Blinders and the Chosen of Papa Nurgle, and you see the problem straight away, as we've talked about for Lava Jackal. It's too many draws. So he'll be very keen to ensure that he turns this one into a victory against the stunty team. You would again fancy the Nurgle to cause all sorts of damage, but with Claw Mighty Blow on the other side as well, there's every chance that Aroma Sin can fight back and cause a little bit of permanent damage to this very, very bloaty Nurgle team. Something around 1920 TV they're sitting at the moment. But yeah, Sneaky Blinders will need to hope that their armour holds out well if they're going to cause any sort of upset. Otherwise it'd be 3 defeats on the spin for them, and that's a seat at the bottom end of the form guide normally if you get 3 defeats on the spin. So he'll be keen to avoid that. But Lava Jackal, of course, with plenty of Strength 4 players to try and handle that Strength 6 Troll as well. And Nurgle, not really a team that are going to be doing too much dodging away from Tentacles. Tentacles on both teams, of course, with the Beast of Nurgle as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. But again, you would probably fancy Lava Jackal to win it. Finally, the Big Cup's taking on Hubat. And it's an interesting test, this one, for Juvazak now against the Vampires. Because, of course, the normal Dwarf strategy would be to cage up, stick guard on the cage corners and whatnot, especially when there's an Agi6 Vampire knocking around. But Hypno Gaze is a thing. And if Paolo B can utilise that effectively, then the Dwarfs could find themselves with some problems against the whole bunch of Strength 4 players that the Vampires have. So by no means a guaranteed victory here, and we could see a first major slip-up in this middle part of the season for Juvazak if he's not careful. He'd be hoping to cause lots of damage to the Thralls to make things a little more difficult for the Vampires to manoeuvre in the way they want to. But, of course, Dwarfs punching armor 7, as we saw last week, is normally a good thing for them. But if you can pick up another win, Juvazak, it'll move them to 21 points. Normally in divisions with 1 spot, you're looking at minimum 28, 29 to have any chance of getting that spot. We've seen teams win 11 games before and not make the playoffs because somebody else won 12. So when there's only one to play for, you really do have to keep reeling in those victories to make sure you've got a chance come the end of the season. But again, you would back the Dwarfs if all that Mighty Blow fires against the Thralls. Okay, guys, so that is it for your Week 7 recap. Hope I didn't miss anything too important this week. And good luck for all of your Week 8 games. We'll be back hopefully around this time next week to look back at how everything went. But until then, look after yourselves and have a good week.